He looked past me toward the road where the fog pressed close. "You won't leave tonight." I didn't like how calm he was. "Is the road closed?" "It's open," he said, "but it won't take you out." I swallowed. "Okay, is there a motel?" The man tilted his head slightly as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Then he said, "The Briar House. That sounds charming." "It's empty," he said. "You can pay in the morning, if you can." I should have kept driving. I should have turned around, even if I got lost, even if I ran out of gas, even if I ended up sleeping in my car on the side of the road. But the fog behind me looked thicker than before. The idea of backing into it made my throat tighten. At least in town there were lights, walls, doors, safety, even if it was an illusion. "Where is it?" I asked. He pointed with one long finger. "End of Maple Street, the house with no curtains." I followed his direction, driving slowly through the empty town. The buildings looked like they'd been painted and repainted until the colors became bruised. Some storefronts had mannequins standing behind dusty glass, frozen in lifeless poses. A few streetlights were on, but their glow didn't reach very far. The fog ate it. Maple Street was narrower than the others, lined with trees that leaned in close. Their branches were bare, black against the gray. The end of the street disappeared into fog, and in that fog a shape waited. A house. The Briar House had the posture of something tired. 2 stories tall, narrow windows like dark eyes, a porch that sagged in the middle. There were no curtains. The windows looked naked, staring out into the street like they were watching for someone. No lights inside. I parked at the curb and sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel, letting the silence settle. The town was so quiet I could hear my own pulse. Then, faintly, I heard something else. Not outside. Inside the car, a soft tapping like a fingernail against glass. I froze. The tapping came again, 3 slow taps, from the passenger side window. I turned my head. There was nothing there, just fog pressed against the glass like breath. I stared for too long, waiting for a face to appear, a hand, a shadow. Nothing did. The tapping stopped. When I finally forced myself to move, I stepped out of the car and approached the house. The porch steps creaked under my weight, but not in the normal way. The sound felt sharp and intentional, like the house was marking my arrival. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. The air inside hit me like a memory. Damp paper, old metal, and beneath that, something faintly sweet, like flowers rotting in water. I flicked the light switch. Nothing. The power was out, or maybe it was never on. I used my phone's flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, sweeping across a narrow hallway. Old framed photographs lined the walls, but the glass was so dusty that faces behind it looked blurred and unfinished. My footsteps sounded too loud. At the end of the hallway was a staircase leading up, and beside it, a doorway into what must have been a living room. I stepped inside. The furniture was covered with sheets, like someone had tried to preserve the shape of the room without preserving its life. The sheets hung in soft folds, turning chairs and couches into pale, humped silhouettes. My light caught something on the coffee table, a notebook. Black cover, thick paper, no title. I don't know why I touched it. Curiosity, maybe, or the way human beings reach toward the only object in a room that feels like it was left there for them. When I opened it, the first page was blank. Then the paper darkened, like ink seeping up from beneath. Words formed slowly, as if written by an invisible hand. "Welcome home." My throat tightened. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I flipped the page hard, like anger could undo what I'd seen. The next page filled itself too. "You're late." I wasn't looking for a town. I was looking for an ending. That sounds dramatic, but it's true. When you spend long enough moving from one place to another, you stop pretending you're starting over. You're just running out the clock. You're just hoping the road will eventually lead to a place where the noise inside your head finally gets quiet. I'd been driving for hours when the fog thickened and the forest swallowed the highway. The pines stood too close together, black trunks packed like a fence. My headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the gray, and everything beyond that tunnel felt like it didn't exist. Then my phone lost service. Not a surprise. The map went blank, the little blue dot floating in an empty world. I tried the radio. Static. I tried again. More static. It wasn't the ordinary hiss you hear between stations. It was dense, wet, almost textured, like it had weight. A few miles later, my fuel light came on. I remember thinking, very clearly, this is how horror stories start. A person makes a dumb decision, ignores the warning signs, and ends up eaten by the woods. But exhaustion makes you stupid, and I was so tired that the thought didn't scare me. It felt inevitable, like fate, like the universe had finally made a decision. A sign emerged from the fog, "Welcome to Harroglen." The paint was cracked, the wood warped. A smaller sign hung beneath it, swinging slightly, as if something had brushed past it. Pop. I drove on. The town appeared as suddenly as if it had been waiting just beyond the fog's edge. A handful of buildings pressed close together. A diner with a dim neon sign, a gas station with one working pump, a grocery store with dark windows, and a church that looked too big for a town this small. There were no people outside, no cars moving, no dogs, no kids, just empty streets and the muffled sound of my tires rolling over wet pavement. The gas station's light flickered like it was undecided about staying on. I pulled in, stepped out, and immediately felt the cold climb under my shirt. Not wind cold, not weather cold, something else. The air smelled faintly of damp paper and old metal. The kind of smell you notice in basements and abandoned schools. The kind of smell that makes you think of forgotten things. I swiped my card at the pump. Nothing happened. I tried again. The screen blinked and went dark. The pump made a quiet, disappointed click. "Cash only," a voice said. I turned. A man stood in the doorway of the station's tiny office. He looked like someone had carved him out of dry wood, tall, narrow, pale. His eyes were light and unreadable, and his hair was the color of ash. He didn't smile. "Sorry," I said, "I didn't see anyone." "You wouldn't," he replied. That made my stomach tighten. I forced a laugh like I was in on a joke. "Do you have an ATM?" He shook his head. "Not anymore." I reached into my wallet and found $42 in cash. It felt like a pathetic amount to be holding in the middle of nowhere, like a child clutching allowance money. Still, I offered it up. He took it without looking at my hand. "Pump 3, he said. "Don't top off." "Why?" His eyes settled on me for the first time in a way that made my skin prickle. "Because the tank will lie." I stood there for a second, waiting for him to explain. He didn't. He just turned and vanished back inside the office as if he'd stepped into darkness that swallowed him whole. I filled my car slowly, half expecting the gas to spill upward or turn into something else. The pump numbers climbed too fast, then slowed, then jumped again. I stopped before it felt right. As I replaced the nozzle, a sound came from the town. Faint, distant, a bell. Not a cheerful church bell. A single, heavy tone that rolled through the fog like a warning. The man appeared again, now standing beside the office door as if he'd been there the whole time. "You're here late," he said. "I didn't plan on it," I answered. I slammed the notebook shut. It made a sound that felt too final, like closing a coffin. I stood there, breathing hard, trying to convince myself I was hallucinating. Exhaustion, stress, the fog, the isolation, my brain playing tricks. Then the bell rang again in the distance, and this time it wasn't alone. A second sound followed it, faint but unmistakable. Footsteps, from upstairs, slow, bare, coming down. I stayed perfectly still, phone light aimed at the staircase, listening. The footsteps above didn't rush. They didn't hesitate. They moved with the slow certainty of someone who knew exactly where they were going, and exactly who was waiting below. One step. Pause. Another step. The old wood groaned under each footfall, but the sound wasn't random. It carried a rhythm, like a heartbeat measured by someone else. I backed toward the front door without turning my head. My hand found the knob. It didn't move. I tried again. The knob turned, but the door didn't open. It felt sealed, like the frame had swollen shut. The fog outside pressed against the glass panels as if it was leaning in. Another step on the stairs. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. Not out of the house, deeper into it. The hallway felt longer than it should have. My phone light shook wildly, catching flashes of those dusty framed photographs. As I passed, I realized the faces weren't just blurred by grime. The faces were wrong. Features faint and unfinished, like the ink of a drawing that had been rubbed away. Someone had been erased. I ducked into the kitchen. It was colder in there, the air thick with that damp paper smell. A table sat in the center beneath a dead light fixture. On the table were 4 place settings: chipped plates, tarnished forks, empty glasses, as if dinner had been waiting. My light swept to the sink. A stack of dishes sat perfectly clean, still wet, like they'd just been washed. And in the corner of the counter beside a jar of rusted utensils lay a small cassette recorder. My stomach turned. I shouldn't have touched it. I touched it anyway. The plastic was cold enough to sting. The buttons were worn. Someone had used it a lot. A label on the side read in faded handwriting, "Harroglen, do not play after dark." The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. I froze. My light fell across the kitchen doorway just as a shape passed it, tall and narrow like the gas station man, but not him. This figure moved too smoothly, like it didn't need joints to bend. It paused at the threshold. I couldn't see its face. Not because it was hidden, because the darkness where its face should have been looked deeper than the rest of the room. "Hello?" it said. The voice was gentle, polite, and it was mine. I felt the hair on my arms rise in a wave. "I'm not..." I began, but the word died in my throat as the figure tilted its head. "Don't lie," it said, still in my voice. "It makes you taste bitter." My lungs refused to pull air. My hands trembled so badly that the flashlight beam wobbled across the floor like an anxious animal. The figure stepped closer. The temperature dropped. I saw my breath, thin white vapor curling from my mouth. "You can sleep now," it said. "You've been driving a long time." It spoke like it cared. That was the worst part. Because for half a second, my body wanted to believe it. Something in me, something tired and desperate, wanted to sink into that voice and let it hold me. My eyes flicked to the kitchen window. No curtains. Fog pressed against it, dense and pale, shifting slowly like a living thing. I remembered what the gas station man had said. The tank will lie. And then, without knowing why, I understood. This town lied the way a mouth lies. Not with words, but with shape. With space. With time. The figure took another step, and I finally saw its hands. They were wrong. Too many joints. Fingers that tapered to blunt ends like they had never learned what fingernails were supposed to be. "Come closer," it whispered, and my body, my traitorous body, leaned forward. I clenched my teeth hard enough to hurt and jerked backward. My shoulder hit the refrigerator. Magnets fell and clattered on the floor. The sound startled me into motion. I grabbed the cassette recorder and hurled it at the figure. It didn't hit. It passed through the air as if the figure wasn't entirely solid, and the recorder slammed into the wall behind it, falling apart with a brittle snap. The figure didn't react, but the room did. The kitchen light fixture, dead moments ago, swung as if struck by an invisible hand. The plates on the table rattled. The air in the room tightened, compressing around me until my ears popped. The figure's voice changed. Still mine, but layered now, like 2 people speaking at once. "I tried to be nice," it said. The fog at the window thickened, pushing inward. The glass bowed slightly as if under pressure. I turned and sprinted out of the kitchen, back into the hall. The house shifted. I don't mean it creaked or settled, I mean it changed. The hallway stretched, the photographs blurring into streaks of dark frames. My phone light seemed weaker, swallowed by the air. I ran harder, but the front door remained far away. receding like a mirage. Behind me, the footsteps followed, slow, unhurried, confident, as if it knew I couldn't outrun geometry. At the top of the stairs, a door creaked open. A child's voice drifted down, soft and sleepy. "Mom?" My breath caught. I didn't have children. I didn't even like children. But the voice was designed to hook into something primitive and human. It made my chest ache with an instinct I didn't understand. I looked up. At the top landing, a small figure stood in the dark. Bare feet, a long shirt like a nightgown. Its face was turned away, hair hanging down like wet string. "Mom?" it said again. Then slowly it turned. There was no face, just smooth skin where features should be, like a doll's head before the eyes were painted on. My knees nearly gave out. A whisper came from behind my ear, warm, intimate. "You see how easy it is?" it said in my own voice. "We only need the sound. Your brain makes the rest." I spun and swung my phone like a weapon. My flashlight beam landed on the figure at the end of the hall. It stood closer now, though I hadn't heard it move. The darkness where its face should have been rippled slightly, like water disturbed by a breath. "Stop running," it said. "You're making the house hungry." The bell in the distance rang again, louder this time. And then I heard something new. A chorus of soft knocks all around me, coming from inside the walls. Tap, 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 like hundreds of fingertips testing the structure, searching for weak points. My mind grabbed at logic. Hallucination, panic, stress. But logic didn't explain the smell, stronger now, like wet books left in a basement. Logic didn't explain the way the floor felt slightly warm beneath my feet, as if something alive moved under the boards. I staggered backward into the living room. The sheet-covered furniture looked like pale bodies crouched in the dark. My phone light swept over them, and for an instant I thought I saw one of the chairs breathe. I almost screamed. On the coffee table, the notebook lay exactly where I'd left it. I hadn't put it back. It was open now. The pages fluttered gently, though there was no wind. Words formed quickly, as if written by someone angry. "Do not speak. Do not listen. Do not sleep." I swallowed hard, staring at the page. Another line appeared beneath, slower, deliberate. "It isn't in the house." My stomach dropped. I lifted my light, shaking, scanning the living room. The figure stood in the doorway, still, patient. Then the notebook wrote again, one word at a time. "It is the house." The walls around me creaked like a jaw tightening. The front window fogged from the outside, and then from the inside too, as if the house had begun breathing against the glass. The sheet-covered furniture shifted subtly, not like cloth settling, like something adjusting its posture beneath the fabric. The figure spoke softly. "You finally understand." The voice wasn't mine now. It was many voices stacked together, layered like a choir, whispering through a keyhole. I recognized some of them anyway, despite never having heard them before. A woman sobbing on the edge of a word, a man trying not to scream, a child whispering please so softly it sounded like air. "You don't have to fight," the house said. "You don't have to be alone in your skin." I clapped my hands over my ears. It didn't help. The voice came from inside my skull. "Your thoughts echo." It continued. "We hear everything you are. We can hold it for you." I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to think of something else. Anything. A song, a grocery list, the name of my first teacher. But every thought I reached for felt slippery, like someone else's fingers were already on it. My eyes flew open. The notebook's page had changed. A map drawn in ink that looked too dark. Simple lines forming Harroglin's streets, with a small mark labeled, "You are here." A second mark pulsed slowly near the edge of town. Church. Underneath, a final sentence appeared, urgent, as if scratched in haste. "If you want out, you must hear the truth on Sunday." My chest heaved. Sunday. I glanced at my phone. No signal, but the date still displayed. Saturday. The town bell rang again, slow and heavy. And from somewhere beneath the floorboards I heard a sound like laughter. Not joyful, not human. The house whispered, "You can stay until Sunday." A pause, like it was savoring the idea. or you can stay forever. I don't remember deciding to leave the house. I only remember standing outside it, fog clinging to my clothes, my breath ragged and loud in the empty street. The Briar House loomed behind me, quiet now, innocent in the way predators look when they know you're already caught. Maple Street stretched ahead, swallowed by mist. Somewhere in the distance, the bell rang again, once, then silence. I walked. Running felt wrong, like it would wake something else. My footsteps sounded too sharp on the pavement, so I slowed, matching the town's unnatural stillness. The houses I passed were all occupied. I knew that without seeing anyone. Lights glowed behind windows with no curtains, warm and inviting. Shadows moved inside, slow shapes crossing rooms, stopping near the glass, then retreating when I got too close. I didn't look directly at them. I remembered the notebook. Do not listen. At the corner, I saw the first person. An old woman stood on her porch, hands folded neatly in front of her. Her face was deeply lined, her eyes bright and focused in a way that made my skin crawl. She smiled. "Evening," she said. I flinched at the sound of a real human voice. "Evening," I replied before I could stop myself. Her smile widened just a fraction. "First night?" she asked. I nodded, wary. "You'll want to be indoors soon," she said gently. "The house gets loud on Saturdays." "What house?" I asked. She laughed softly as if I'd made a joke. "Oh, honey, all of them." Her eyes flicked past me toward the end of the street. "The church bell's already rung," she added. "You don't want to be out when it starts calling names." I felt a chill slide down my spine. "Calling names?" She tilted her head, listening. "Yes," she said. "Yours, most likely." Before I could ask what she meant, a door slammed somewhere behind me, then another. One by one, houses along the street closed themselves off. Lights went out, porches emptied, the town withdrew. The old woman stepped back into her house and shut the door, locking it with a sound that echoed too loudly. I was alone again. The bell rang. This time, it rang twice. And beneath it, faint but unmistakable, I heard voices carried on the fog, speaking names, not shouting, not chanting, reading. I walked faster. The church rose out of the mist at the center of town like a monument to something that had never been kind. Its stone walls were dark with moisture, its windows tall and narrow. Light burned inside, steady and bright. The doors were open. Of course they were. As I approached, the voices grew clearer. They came from everywhere at once, layered and overlapping, but one thread cut through them all. My name. I clapped my hands over my ears and stumbled up the church steps. The moment I crossed the threshold, the sound cut off like a switch had been flipped. Silence. The inside of the church was warmer than the rest of the town, but not comforting. The air smelled old and sweet, like mold hidden behind incense. Rows of wooden pews stretched toward the altar, all of them occupied. People sat perfectly still, facing forward. Every head turned as I entered. Dozens of faces looked back at me. Men, women, children, all ages. Their expressions were calm, almost serene, too serene. I recognized the gas station man in the front row. He met my eyes and gave a small, polite nod. A door closed behind me. I didn't turn around. A man stood at the pulpit. Tall, narrow, familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. He had my face. Not exactly. It was like looking at a reflection in warped glass. Close enough to be undeniable, wrong enough to be horrifying. "Welcome," he said. The congregation spoke as one. "Welcome home." My knees buckled, but I stayed upright through sheer panic. "I don't belong here," I said. My voice echoed too much in the space, bouncing off the stone. The man smiled. "No one does at first," he gestured to the pews. "Please, sit, the service is about to begin." "I'm not staying," I said. A ripple passed through the room. Not movement, attention. The people leaned in slightly, like an audience expecting a performance. "You already are," the man replied. "You stayed the night." He raised one finger. "That's rule one." "Rule one of what?" I demanded. "Heroglin," he said. "The house, the body, the listening." He stepped down from the pulpit and walked toward me. The congregation remained still, eyes tracking him. Rule 2, he continued, is that you don't sleep through the bell. My heart hammered. And Rule 3? He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could see details in his face that didn't belong. Skin too smooth in places, eyes reflecting light incorrectly. Rule 3, he said softly, is that you attend Sunday service. What happens on Sunday? I asked. His smile deepened. We tell the truth. He turned and gestured toward the altar. Play it. A woman in the front row stood and carried a cassette recorder to the pulpit, the same one from the Briar House kitchen. She placed it down reverently and pressed play. Static filled the church. Then a voice emerged, a man's voice, shaking, terrified. If anyone hears this, if you're new, listen carefully. Harroglen isn't a town. It's a structure, a system. It listens to us, learns us. The congregation didn't react. They listened like parishioners hearing a familiar sermon. We thought it was a place at first, the voice continued. A curse, a demon, a house. But it's not any one thing. It's the space between walls, the echo after sound. It feeds on attention. The voice broke into sobs. It can't create, it can only copy. That's why it needs us. I felt sick. They stay, the voice said. The ones who stop fighting, the ones who get tired, they become rooms, voices, pieces of the town. The tape crackled. If you want to leave, you have to hear it all. Every voice, every truth. It hurts, but pain reminds you who you are. The tape clicked off. The man at the pulpit looked at me expectantly. That was him, he said. The last one who tried to burn us. Murmurs of disapproval rippled through the congregation. He didn't listen long enough, the man continued. He panicked, ran. You know how that ends. I swallowed. You replace people. We preserve them, he corrected. We keep them from vanishing. We give them permanence. You erase them, I said. He shook his head. We distribute them. He leaned closer. Do you know how many people disappear every year? How many lives end quietly, unnoticed? Here, no one is ever alone. No one is ever wasted. My chest felt tight. You trap them. We house them. The bell outside rang again, once. The man straightened. Saturday is nearly over. The congregation stood in unison. You can leave the church, he said kindly. Walk the town. Sleep if you dare. But when the bell rings tomorrow, his eyes locked onto mine, you come back, and you listen. The doors behind me opened on their own. Fog spilled inside like breath. Or, he added, almost as an afterthought, you can try to run. The congregation smiled. I backed away slowly, never breaking eye contact until the church doors swallowed me again. Outside, the town waited. Lights flickered on across Harroglen. Windows brightened. Shadows pressed close to the glass, eager. The bell rang once more. Somewhere very close, something whispered my name, and I understood the final rule without being told. In Harroglen, Sunday always comes. I walked until my legs burned. The town no longer felt empty. It felt attentive. Every window I passed seemed to brighten just a little as I drew near, like an eye widening in interest. Curtains twitched, though there was no wind. Somewhere behind the walls, something shifted, adjusting itself to me. I understood now why running didn't work. Harroglen wasn't trying to stop me. It was trying to know me. The motel appeared near the edge of town, like an afterthought, its sign flickering weakly. I don't remember choosing it. I just found myself inside, sitting on the edge of a bed that smelled faintly of damp cloth and old detergent. The room had no mirror. That should have reassured me. It didn't. I locked the door, then checked it again. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The notebook lay on the nightstand. I hadn't brought it with me. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. The pages were thicker now, heavier, like they had absorbed something. The writing appeared slowly. Sunday is a gift. It lets you share the weight. I flipped the page violently. Do not sleep. That message stayed. No matter how many pages I turned, it repeated. Over and over. Same words. Same ink. Like a command burned into the paper. I sat on the floor with my back against the bed and waited for morning. It didn't come. The clock on the wall ticked, but the hands barely moved. Outside the window, the fog never thinned. The bell didn't ring again, but I felt its absence like pressure. Then the voices started. At first they were distant, murmurs bleeding through the walls like sound through water. I told myself it was plumbing, wind, anything, but the voices had words. I didn't mean to stay. I was so tired. Please don't forget me. I can't remember my face. I clamped my hands over my ears. The voices moved closer. They came from the vents, from the floor, from inside the mattress behind me, where something pressed gently as if testing the shape of my spine. "You hear us now," a voice said softly. Not mine, older, frayed, human. "That means you're still you." The wall opposite me darkened, not shadow, depth. The surface of it seemed to sink inward, like a curtain pulled aside. Shapes emerged slowly, overlapping, translucent. Faces. Hundreds of them. Men and women layered over one another, mouths moving, eyes open but unfocused. Some cried, some stared blankly. Some smiled in ways that made my stomach churn. They weren't screaming, they were talking, all at once. "It starts with the house. It starts with the voice. It starts when you answer." My chest burned. I forced myself to breathe. "What do you want?" I whispered. The faces leaned forward. "To be heard," they said together. The pressure in the room intensified. The walls bowed slightly, like lungs filling with air. I felt something tug at my thoughts, not pulling them away, but rearranging them. Memories surfaced that weren't mine. A woman unpacking boxes in a kitchen that wasn't this one. A man driving too long through fog, radio hissing. A teenager crying in a church pew, begging for silence. Their memories slid into me like warm water. I screamed. The scream came out wrong. Too many echoes. I slapped my hands over my mouth and tasted blood. My teeth felt loose, my jaw aching like it had been speaking without me. "No," I gasped. "Get out." The faces didn't retreat, they softened. "We tried that," they said. "It doesn't listen to no, only to quiet." Something moved inside my chest, not pain, alignment, like my heartbeat had found another rhythm and decided to follow it. The notebook flipped itself open. A new sentence formed, careful and neat. "This is the part where you let go." My vision blurred. The room felt very far away, like I was looking at it through thick glass. I felt hands on me, not physical hands. Attention. Focus, every voice pressed closer, overlapping, sinking into me. I felt words crowd behind my eyes, thoughts lining up behind my tongue, desperate to be said. I understood then. Sunday wasn't about escape. It was about division. Harroglen didn't replace you all at once. It diluted you, spread you thin enough that you could exist everywhere at once. Safe, quiet, eternal. The bell rang. Close. Right outside the motel. My body stood up. I don't remember deciding to move. I walked out of the room, down the hallway, past doors that opened briefly as I passed. Faces watched me go, grateful, hollow. Outside, the town glowed. Not with light, with presence. Every building felt full, alive, listening. The church doors stood open, blazing white inside. The man with my face waited at the altar. "You made it," he said warmly. The congregation filled the pews, all of them smiling now. They looked healthier than before. Fuller, like something inside them had finally stopped resisting. "Sit," he said. I did. The bell rang one last time. Silence followed. Perfect, crushing silence. The man raised his hands. "Today," he said, "we share." The walls of the church began to move. Not collapse, open. They peeled back like pages, revealing darkness behind them, and within that darkness, faces. More than I could count. Layer upon layer, stretching back endlessly. Every voice I'd heard, every thought I'd felt. They leaned forward, pouring into the room, into me. I screamed again. This time the scream didn't hurt. It felt relieving, like setting something down after carrying it too long. My thoughts blurred, names dissolved, memories softened at the edges. I felt myself becoming quieter, calmer. The man smiled. "Almost," he said. Somewhere deep inside, something small and terrified clawed upward. Not a thought, an instinct. I bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood again. The pain flared bright and sharp, cutting through the fog in my head. I clung to it. Pain meant separation. Pain meant me. I stumbled to my feet. The congregation gasped, not angry, not alarmed, disappointed. The walls pulsed, voices surging, trying to drown me again. I ran, not out of the church, through it, through the altar, through the wall behind it, into the darkness beyond. The darkness screamed, and for the first time since I'd arrived in Harroglen, something sounded afraid. The darkness wasn't empty, it was crowded. I ran through it, or something like running, my feet barely touching anything solid. Shapes brushed past me, thoughts without bodies, memories without owners. Faces surfaced and sank again like drowning swimmers. The screaming wasn't sound, it was resistance. Harroglen didn't want me there. Not there. It wanted me seated, organized, divided neatly into rooms and voices. The darkness tightened, pressing in on me, trying to slow me down. I felt hands again, attention, focus, grasping at my thoughts, tugging them loose. Names slipped, faces blurred. I bit my tongue harder until pain flared white-hot and grounding. Blood filled my mouth. I welcomed it. The darkness recoiled slightly, like it didn't like sharp edges. I burst through something that felt like a membrane, and fell. I hit wet ground hard, knocking the air from my lungs. Cold soaked through my clothes instantly. I lay there gasping, the world spinning, the taste of iron thick in my mouth. Fog hung low over a narrow road, a real road. Asphalt cracked and uneven beneath my hands. I laughed, a broken, hysterical sound, and rolled onto my back, staring up at a sky that looked wrong but honest. Empty, vast. Behind me, something roared, not anger, loss. The sound rolled across the fog, deep and layered, like 1,000 voices crying out at once. I scrambled to my feet and ran again, lungs burning, legs screaming. The road stretched ahead, straight and simple. I didn't look back. I ran until my body gave out. When I woke, I was in a hospital. White walls, beeping monitors, the clean, merciless smell of disinfectant. A nurse noticed my eyes flutter and leaned over me. "Easy," she said. "You're safe. Safe." The word felt fragile. "What happened?" I croaked. She exchanged a glance with someone behind me. "You were found on the side of a county road. Hypothermic, dehydrated, no ID." "Town," I whispered. "Fog, houses." She smiled gently. "You're not the first to come out of the woods talking like that." "How long?" I asked. 3 days, she said. "You've been unconscious." 3 days. Sunday had come and gone. They kept me for observation. Asked questions I couldn't answer. Ran tests that showed nothing wrong except exhaustion and malnutrition. No missing persons report matched me. No town named Harroglen appeared on any map. When I asked about nearby churches, the doctor shook his head. "There's an old foundation out in the woods," he said. "Burned down decades ago. Locals say people get turned around near it." "People disappear," I said. He didn't answer that. They released me 2 days later with pamphlets and worried looks. I bought new clothes, a cheap phone, a notebook. Not that notebook. I avoided churches, avoided houses, slept outside when I could. When I couldn't, I slept with lights on and pain ready, pinching skin, biting down, anything to remind myself where I ended. For a while it worked. Weeks passed, then months. The nightmares came less often. The voices faded into memory. I started to believe I'd escaped. That was my second mistake. It began with echoes. I'd speak, and a half-second later, I'd hear my own voice repeat the last word, softer, like it came from far away. I blamed stress. Then I woke one morning with ink on my fingers. I hadn't been writing. The notebook lay open beside me, blank pages, waiting. I slammed it shut and threw it away. It came back the next night. The first sentence was short. "Calm is how we find you." I stopped sleeping. I stayed moving. Roads, trains, bus stations, but Harroglen wasn't a place. It was a pattern. Any quiet space held the risk of it. Any building with walls that listened. Any moment where exhaustion softened the edges of fear. One night, in a rest stop bathroom, I looked up despite myself. The mirror showed me, mostly, but my reflection blinked a fraction too late. I smashed the mirror and ran. Now I record this. I don't know where I am. I don't know how long I have. Writing isn't safe anymore. Words linger. They can be reread. relearned, sound fades. That's the hope. If you're hearing this, then I need you to understand the final truth. Haroglin doesn't hunt everyone, only the tired, only the lonely, only those who listen too closely to the quiet. If you ever find yourself driving through fog and see a town that feels too attentive, too patient, do not stop. If you hear a bell calling names, do not answer. If a voice sounds like yours but feels calmer than you've ever felt, run. And if someday you wake up feeling completely at peace, completely unafraid, in a place you don't quite remember choosing, that's when it's already too late, because fear is the last thing it takes from you. And when it's gone, so are you.